Welcome to Brutally Anna, a podcast about finding love, losing love, and all the things we think about but don't talk about enough. I'm your host, Anna Kai, aka Maybe Both across social media, here to remind you that life can be beautiful even when it's freaking brutal. Our guest today, Aurora Culpo, knows a thing or two about getting brutally honest with not only herself, but with the world. While some of you may have seen Aurora's very raw and real journey through the beginning stages of her divorce on TLC's The Culpo Sisters, I'm here to talk to her about how she not only survived her divorce, but how she's thrived since then. Aside from being a full-time single mom, Aurora is a wellness content creator, host of the podcast Barely Filtered, and is here today to show us all that life can be beautiful even when it's a little messy. Aurora, thanks so much for being here. I am so excited to chat with you. We've been talking.
We have.
But now I get to flip the script and ask you all the invasive questions I've had for you for several months now.
I love it. I'm so ready.
So you had a very public divorce from your ex-husband that unraveled in the most social media-esque way possible.
Yeah, I know.
And for those that didn't watch it happen on the Culpo Sisters, can you walk us through the DM that led to your divorce?
Oh, God. Yes. Oh, wow. I haven't had to tell this story in a while. I guess we'll just go right back to that time. So I was actually like breastfeeding my youngest child at the time. She was probably like 8 months old or something. And I'm on my phone just scrolling through and somebody pops in my DMs and they're like, just so you know, your husband slept with my friend last weekend in like Myrtle Beach. And I was like, how did she know he was in Myrtle Beach? He was on like a golf trip with his friends. And I asked him about it and he said no. And then she goes on to describe the sex. And when you know your person, you know your person. And I was like, that's him. And I like brought it up to him again and he was denying it and was denying it and was denying it. But we had an agreement, which people are going to think is crazy. And I've made peace with this. This was the 25-year-old version of me who like thought that this was something I could do and that was a good idea and could work in our relationship, which was that he could actually, he could get a 1 a year. And a 1 a year was based on the premise that men cannot be monogamous and that I didn't want to change him and I would rather not be lied to. So I wanted to give him the freedom to sleep with one other person a year. It couldn't be anybody that we knew. It couldn't be anybody that no feelings could be involved. If there were feelings, he would need to tell me. We would need to, not be together. They didn't roll over, so you couldn't like bank them all and use them down the road for an orgy. And you guys, this came from like a very broken place. This was like I had come off of a relationship before I met him where I was one of many girlfriends where I thought I was the only one. And it was years of really like emotional abuse from this guy I was dating before I met my ex-husband. And so when I met him, I was like, you're perfect in so many ways. But he was very upfront with me in the beginning of like, I don't know if I can be with one person for the rest of my life. I don't know if that's what I want. I don't know if I believe in monogamy. And me being, 25, broken, and really connecting with this like we had so much fun together. We really cared about each other. I was like, okay, listen, maybe biologically men are wired to spread their seed far and wide, and like who am I to try to change that about you? And I'd rather and I respect the fact that you're being upfront with me and not lying to me and pretending like you like have any intention of being monogamous like every other guy I've ever dated who ends up just cheating. So I'll give you this freedom. You can sleep with one other person a year and I'm not going to feel threatened by that because what we have is so special anyway. And it's just sex. Like, it's not like emotional connection. You're just like, it's part of like the man's instinct to hunt. And he said to me at the time, he was like, just by you granting me this freedom, I probably like won't even use it because I won't need to because I'll feel like just to know that I have that freedom is enough. So we kind of left it at that. And then fast forward a few years down the road, he had never used it. He couldn't tell me if he used it. I wasn't to ask because I knew, like, if I knew that I would get in my head about it. And everybody always asks me, did you also get a 1 a year? No, I did not get a 1 a year because I didn't ask for one, because I didn't need one or want one, because I don't know. I guess I thought women are not wired that way. Only men are wired that way. And so fast forward, we get married. We never really like addressed this 1 a year thing. I assumed he wasn't using it. Our relationship was really going really well, whatever. I ended up finding out later that he actually wasn't using it. He hadn't used it at all. The first time he used it was a month after we got married. So, and I ended up finding that out because when I was breastfeeding my daughter, somebody DM'd me, asked me about this. He denied it, which wasn't part of the deal. Like, well, we never talked about, like, when I ask you, you say, I guess I wasn't supposed to ask. See, we needed a contract. We needed a lawyer to take a look at this deal before we.
There was a lot that you did not figure out. Yeah. Like, the details were not really there.
No. And what ended up happening was we went to the beach with our kids. He was in the water. He had his phone. He left his phone on the towel. This was the first time in our 9-year relationship I ever went through his phone. I went through his phone. He was talking about it to somebody else who was one of our mutual friends. Made that relationship a little bit sticky for a few years. And basically it did happen. And I confronted him about it. And he was like, I didn't want you to know because I didn't want it to hurt your feelings. And I was like, how mmany other times has this happened? And he said it happened one other time at his best friend's like 40th birthday party. And then when I looked back, obviously my phone of when that 40th birthday party was, it was literally a month after we got married. But that wasn't even why we got divorced. We got divorced because he was actually upset with me that I had gone, like, I was like, okay, I'm not mad at you that this happened. I understand that, like, you thought you had this freedom because this is the freedom I gave you. I have no right to be mad at you about it. But, like, now that it's happened and I know that this is the way it makes me feel, I don't like it and I'm not capable of this. I don't want this to be part of the relationship. He was like, okay, fine. We can squash the 1 a year. That won't be a thing anymore. But there was always kind of resentment from that point on about me changing
the rule.
And you know, and more things started to unfold after that about just our inherent incompatibility in terms of a partnership.
Well, I think I remember you saying that you had always hoped that having kids would turn Mikey into a family man, that he would choose his family over going out with the boys and the freedoms that he had when he was a bachelor. And it appears that did not happen.
Yeah, that was something
he really valued his freedoms, and that when he told you he wasn't sure he could be monogamous, that he was really telling you the truth almost in a way.
Yes, for sure. And that's why I don't mind talking about it, and he doesn't mind if I talk about it, because it's like, it's not bashing him. Like, if anybody changed their tune, it was me. And he was upfront in the beginning about who he was, and he still is that person.
What do you think it was in you that really wanted to believe that you could change him and that kids would change him?
I think it's when well, for me, I really wanted to be a mom, and I had this timeline in my head that if I didn't make it happen before I was 30, that, like, I was going to die. It was the one thing I was always really sure I wanted in my life. And I was with him, and I think so many boxes were checked in him that I really loved, and I knew he was going to be a great dad. And there was just like these few little minor things like that he couldn't be faithful that I was like, I'm just going to, you can't have everything in life. Not everything's going to be perfect. And so I forced it. And I think I was just really hoping that kids would change him, that family life would change him. And it's just not, it wasn't reasonable or realistic. I didn't think anybody could have kids and a family and not be changed. And of course, like, it did change him in a lot of ways, but not who he inherently was or wanted.
Exactly. And did he want kids?
He did. Not like I did. Like,
right.
He would have been fine with maybe one. And he's also 15 years older than me. So, like, when I met him, I was 25, he was 40. So he didn't have kids yet, and he wasn't, like, really trying. I think if it wasn't for me, he probably wouldn't have had kids, and I think he would have probably been okay with it. I don't know. He would probably hate me if I said that because he's an amazing father, loves our children. And I think if you asked him, he'd probably say, no, I always knew I'd be a dad. I would always want kids. But I'm like, what was the plan? You know, like there was no plan.
You certainly weren't making moves in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. When I met him, he was like literally living out of an RV, pretty much like traveling around following Dave Matthews. And my parents were like, what are you doing? Like, nobody understood why I connected with him because he was so much older and he was like just this very free spirit. But I don't know. So my life choices sometimes always keep people guessing.
But what is it now that you've had some time to reflect on why you were attracted to that life? Because it's not the life you live.
No, I loved, and this is something that I'm still very attracted to, like in a person. I like somebody who beats to their own drum, that has like an entrepreneurial spirit, that doesn't follow norms of society. And I think that kind of why was part of our whole agreement. Like I thought I was being very progressive, I think, with this with this thing of like, I don't need to be the only person. I'm not threatened by that. It's just sex. Like what we have is this deeper connection. And honestly, I think that probably can work for some people. Like there's a whole, now that I'm on Raya and dating, like there's a whole section of people out there who live in this polygamous world and make it work. Now, like one guy, I thank God I did a FaceTime date with him first because he told me like he's polygamous, and I was just like, okay, well I tried that. It doesn't work for me. So thank you. I don't want to waste any more of your time.
But is there a section that you can write that on Raya? Because I feel like you should.
There is.
I feel like if you're polygamous and you're on a dating app, you should disclose that right away so that you don't even waste time even on the FaceTime date.
100%. I think it's like either here for friends, which by the way, no, they're not. and here for friends or not here for friends.
Yeah, I feel like on Raya, you need to be very, very upfront about whether you have made some life choices that are not necessarily what the masses have chosen. And I say this as somebody who dated on a dating app, vegan and sober. I made the decision to be vegan and sober for almost a year because of a guy, of course.
Of course.
But then that guy left me. And then I decided that it was actually very good for my mental health to not drink and to eat vegan and be very clean. And
have you stayed vegan and sober?
I have not stayed vegan, but I am sober now. And I have been sober for about a year. It'll be a year in January.
No wonder your skin looks so amazing.
My skin actually has gotten better, amongst other things.
Yeah. I wish I had known that. I might just hijack your podcast for a second and talk about that because I'm actually on a sober journey myself. But mine keeps going like 6 months and then I'll drink again. And I'm like, I actually hate feeling hungover.
But do you like the taste of alcohol?
Oh, I love red wine.
See, I don't think I really ever like the taste of alcohol. So I'm not exactly qualified to give advice on how to quit drinking because I never liked the taste. I always just liked how it made me feel because I have a lot of social anxiety in big situations, and it would always be that liquid courage I needed at parties.
For dating. Yeah.
And just to feel more social, I love one-on-one interactions, actually. So maybe dating wasn't that hard for me. I struggle with big groups of people, parties. So I don't love—
How has that been in this year of not drinking?
Well, I just don't go to that many parties, and it's actually been really great. And I just really live my life the way I want to now, and I say no to a lot of things, and it's been very freeing. And I mostly quit drinking for my mental health because I struggle a lot with anxiety and depression and obsessive compulsive disorder.
Same.
So,
which it turns out alcohol just makes it worse.
It does.
It really does.
The anxiety is so real the next day.
The worst.
And it just really wasn't doing anything for me. And so I just decided to quit, and I didn't give myself a timeline. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to stop forever. I just said, I'm just going to take a pause. And the pause just ended up lasting. And I am at a point where I never say I'm never going to do something because you never know.
That's my problem. Like I get on my show and I'm like, guys, for those of you wondering, I am now a sober person. I'd like to be addressed as such. And they're like, how many days do you have? I'm like, that's not important. It's been about 2. And then like, of course, like a couple months later, I'm drinking and I'm like, Yeah, shut up.
But that's very real. And I think a lot of people do that. And it's okay to flip-flop. It's okay to
It's a little embarrassing, but I'm getting over the embarrassment. It's happened so many times.
I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, why is it embarrassing? Who cares? Like, it's not anybody else's life.
It's true. It's only embarrassing because I feel like you look more like you have a problem when you keep going back and forth about it.
I mean, it's only a problem if it really affects your quality of life, right?
Which it does. Like, not in a way where I'm like drunk driving or like can't care for my children or like lose jobs, but it definitely gives me anxiety.
Right. And it's tougher to get through your day when you're hungover.
Mm-hmm.
And I just noticed in my early 20s, I never got hangovers and I could recover very quickly and it didn't affect me. But I would have 1 or 2 glasses of wine at dinner on a Wednesday and the next morning I'd just wake up feeling a little not okay.
Are we old? Like,
we
what
are.
Is this?
But it's great. You could not pay me to go back to my 20s. I love
me either.
being 34. But I will say what I do miss about my 20s is the just sheer recklessness with which I treated my body and my body just withstood it and was like, game time, baby, right? There's just truly nothing like if you are 22 listening to this, it will never get better.
Never.
So if you're going to develop a drinking habit, you better do it at 22 versus 32 because you'll feel way worse at 32.
Literally.
And I think it's so funny because Gen Z is actually so not into alcohol. I think that's the reason we have all these sober options now at restaurants and everything because Gen Z is really the opposite of millennials in terms of how they function and they're a very sober generation in general.
Are they?
Yeah.
I haven't even realized that.
I've heard a lot of anecdotal stories about how Gen Z is very sober.
They're just vaping.
They're just, which I want to ask you about too because I know you recently quit that.
Yeah.
But back to the topic of your ex-husband cheating on you and just sort of this whole idea of monogamy.
Well, he didn't cheat.
Well, but okay, here's the thing. You said that he was allowed to, but then we didn't define whether he was allowed to lie about it. So there is that thing, is that if he had just copped to it when you asked him the first time, I think I would be a little less inclined to call it cheating because technically that was his hall pass.
Right.
But he didn't admit to it.
That was... I don't know if he would agree with. I mean, he's kind of one of those people who probably would not say he did anything wrong in any way. But he shouldn't have lied. He should have admitted it because. But then I think he thought it was part of the deal that his excuse was he didn't want to hurt my feelings.
Okay, well, the damage is done.
The damage was done.
And also, I always wonder. It's like, do you really think? Now Aurora's going to go back and be like, okay, well, he said he didn't, so that's fine. I'll just believe him.
I know. No, yeah, of course.
Like,
we go into like detective mode.
I know. I was like, what do you think? We're just going to be like, sure, whatever. Maybe there are women out there that do that. I truly believe that there are some women who are with men who, by the way, they don't have a hall pass. They're in purely traditional monogamous relationships, and they just turn a blind eye because it's easier.
Because it's easier. I wonder, I mean, I think there's a lot of financial reasons behind it. Luckily, I was in a situation where I knew I could be divorced and support myself. But man, that's such a tough one to have to stay in a relationship for financial reasons.
I had somebody DM me last year who said, I got married in my early 20s. We have 2 kids. And I need to leave my husband, and I've never worked. I was always taught to just be a mom. I don't even know if she went to school. She was like, I'm so scared, but we're getting divorced, and I have to go find a job now. And I just thought, amen. Like, it's just good on you for leaving even in that situation because so many people wouldn't leave.
No.
And it's so difficult. And
you're just kicking the can down the road. It's like,
exactly.
You know, if maybe the divorce wouldn't happen then, but like it could happen further down the road, and it's even harder to get back into the workforce then. So at least she's young enough to get into the workforce. And I think I talked about this with you earlier on your podcast that I think the most important thing women can do is make money. It's so simple. It really
frees you so much from having to depend on a man to give you nice things. It's really nice to be taken care of, but it's so much nicer to know that I don't need you to buy me this. Like, I know one of your exes bought you a Chanel bag, But it's so nice getting it from a man, but knowing I can buy myself this if I want to.
It's true. But then sometimes I'm like, well, what's your value anyway? Like, you have a penis? I could just hump the couch. It's like,
I mean, all these sex toys now, they're like, they're like, what is this?
Seriously.
But companionship is important. I think we're hardwired to do that. I think conversation is important. My husband's my best friend.
Aww.
And so I always think, like, at the end of the day, like, I hope to grow old and wrinkly with him when nothing is sexy and functional.
You're never going to get wrinkly with that skin and the not drinking and
fingers crossed.
Whatever skincare products you're using.
Fingers crossed. I think age gets to us all. There's a joke with Asian women is that we don't age until we hit menopause, and then we just all turn into 3-foot-tall potatoes.
Yeah.
So we'll see, but I accept it. Aging is a gift, but I think you got to find somebody who's like your best friend. Essentially, it's somebody who makes you feel like you're with a girlfriend that you want to have sex with, essentially.
Yeah.
And before that, I dated a lot of men that I was attracted to, but I was like, we don't have the same chemistry and the same kind of levity that I have with a friend. Like, there's nothing I'd rather be doing more on a Friday night than just sitting on the couch watching Dateline with Dave. It's truly my favorite thing in the whole world.
You're like, this is how I would murder you if it was going to happen.
And both of us were so into true crime that at this stage, neither one of us could pull something on the other because we know it all.
You know it all.
It's like, if you feed me a drink all of a sudden, or like there's a Diet Coke and you're like, drink this, I'm like, you're trying to kill me.
Yeah,
right?
It's like, I'm not going to go on any weird hiking trails with you where there's cliffs.
Absurd. Do you think once a cheater, always a cheater? Or do you think men can change?
I do think men can change. I think they can change for themselves, though. Like, I don't think that you're going to be a catalyst for a man changing, and I don't think you can expect that anybody can change for anybody other than themselves. But
that's so disappointing to all the women who think that they're going to be the reason to save the man.
Well,
which, by the way,
I
blame on Hollywood because it's the whole manic pixie dream girl idea where for so long in the 90s and 2000s, all these rom-coms were these tormented men who were saved by the women that came into their lives. There's actually a really good article on this from forever ago about the movie Elizabethtown. Do you remember that?
No.
With Orlando Bloom and Kirsten Dunst. And his father dies, and I think he lives in a big city. And he travels home back to where he's from to attend his father's funeral, and he's all fucked up and he's depressed and whatever, and he meets Kirsten Dunst, and she's like the manic pixie dream girl. She exists to serve his storyline and to save him. And of course, he realizes he's in love with her and it saves his life and he's no longer depressed. And she's the reason. And I think we grew up with those tropes.
Yeah.
There's so many rom-coms like that where the man gets to be complex and tormented and it's almost sexy in a way. And I think that's why
the like quiet, shy, mysterious one. It's like he's not mysterious. He's just dumb. He doesn't have anything to say.
That is so true. It's like he's not actually tormented and he's not complex.
No, he's high.
He's high and he's dumb and he's lazy. He doesn't want to try. Sorry. But I think that's where it comes from. It's like it's so romantic to think you're the reason why a man changed, right? And it almost never happens.
It never does. And it's such a tough pill to swallow. I think some of us, it takes a little longer to learn that lesson. You know, there's still a part of me that, like, I'm not going to say who it is, but there's this guy that from Raya. He's famous. You definitely know his name. I'm not going to say it, but he has a reputation of dating a lot of young women, one after the other, whatever.
Right.
And like, he's in my DMs, whatever. We've been talking just because I'm like, this is funny to talk to this person. Like, you know, a banter with somebody that like has been in your Rolodex of like famous people for your whole life. I'm like, this is interesting. But I'm like, a part of me is like, maybe I could change him. Like, maybe it's not like, you know, that he's dated 900 like different young women who couldn't change him, but like I could be the one to change him. But I need to be like, Aurora, get it together. No. The best indication of future behavior is past behavior.
Yes.
And nothing about me is that different and unique from these other girls that would change him. Unless he like, the only thing that I've seen really change people is like joining a cult, finding a new religion, like some kind of like mental brainwashing. Otherwise, no.
Right. Which, by the way, Bethany Joy Lenz just published her memoir about leaving a cult, and it's like a New York Times bestseller.
I saw that.
So I need to read that because that's
me too.
crazy. I was a huge One Tree Tree Hill fan growing up. I don't know if you watched that show.
I wasn't really.
Were you into the OC or anything more?
Yeah, OC.
If you were more OC, you were less One Tree Hill.
Yeah.
I was madly in love with everybody on One Tree Hill, and especially James Lafferty. He was my celebrity crush growing up. And him and Bethany Joy Lenz's character, Haley, were like married and they had kids and they were a teen pregnancy. And somehow that was very okay on the show. It was very glamorized.
Yeah,
and
it was
worked
like,
out.
you were like, that looks kind of fun to me. We should try that.
I know. I don't know. Thankfully, that didn't happen in me. But I thought I was like, oh, I didn't know you were in a cult. Like after One Tree Hill, you just assumed that you just went on to continue to be famous and act and everything. But yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like you have to almost be brainwashed in order to change. And I don't really think that the core of who somebody is changes, because I've dated men. I had this one guy that I dated when I was 22 for a month, and I gave him my whole, and I don't think it was even a hard and fast rule for me at the time. It was like, I don't want to sleep with you just because I know you're kind of a boy toy. And he was like, yeah, I kind of am.
And you said that to him. He was okay with it?
And I was very honest with him. And I will say he was very honest with me, which made it easier. It's almost like what you had with Mikey, where it's almost like we were so honest with each other that I was like, it's meant to be. I'm going to change him.
Yeah.
I'm so cool with this.
Where it's like, sometimes
we think
honesty
we're the first
is not
people
enough. It's like,
we think we're the first women to ever say it's okay that you're doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And I just always felt like I can't trust you. I don't want to sleep with you. And then we ended up just not seeing each other after a month or two. And then I went on to date somebody else for a year. And then I ran into him again on the street after that relationship ended, and it felt like fate. And
yes, of course.
I'm like, oh my gosh.
Serendipity.
I was like, I am living my own Sex in the City right now. It was like he was big and he kept coming into my life.
Yes.
And so we went out again, and he gave me this line. He was like, I feel like we really should try. Like, you're, like
the
this
universe.
Was I know, the universe. Which I do. I am spiritual. I do believe that a lot of things in my life are not coincidences. I don't really particularly believe in coincidences, but I believe that coincidence happened to teach me that some men do not change. Because basically what happened was we went on a date, and then he was like, I'm going to Miami this weekend. Do you want to come with me? And I was like, no, I have to work because I was in real estate. And you work mostly on the weekends. And he was like, okay, well, when I get back from Miami next week, I think we should figure this out. I think we should really do this. And I was like, okay, great. Text me when you're back from Miami. Never heard from him again.
Stop.
Yeah.
He must have found somebody in Miami.
I know. I think it was just, I was like, did you just say all that to try and get me to come with you to Miami so you had a fuck buddy in Miami?
Oh my God, maybe.
Yes. So
this is so, people are so confusing. I don't get it. This is why men are confusing to me, because like, I'm not aggressive with somebody unless I really want that. Like if I want you, because I'm like, you can't, like I chase you pretty much. Men chase girls that they don't want sometimes.
Yeah. Well, for their own ego.
What is that?
I think, and I talk about this story on your podcast, but I was chased by a man that I dated for 6 weeks. He gaslit me really badly. I've talked about this before in my content because he was so traumatic in my life.
Yeah.
And looking back on that situation, this man basically texted me from morning until night for 6 weeks. After our first date, we saw each other a couple times a week, and then he ghosted me on Valentine's Day. And that's when I realized that he did not want to commit to me, even though every indication up until that point was that he did want to commit to me. And then what I realized was, because it was a very small world situation. He was 9 years older than me, but his ex-girlfriend, who he was with for 3 years and was living with him, was actually a mutual friend with a girlfriend of mine. Okay. And I didn't realize this until I showed a picture of this guy that I'd been dating for 6 weeks to my girlfriend and being like, look what he did to me. And she's like, I know him. I met him at a party. He dated this person that I know through just randomly. It's such a small world.
Yeah.
And he had told me when I met him on the first date that he had recently broken up with his long-term girlfriend, but that it had ended in August. So we met in January. August feels like a very appropriate timeline, right? To break up with somebody and then get back in the dating pool. It's like, okay, you gave yourself a couple months to recover. I found out from my girlfriend who knows his ex-girlfriend that he had broken up with her over Christmas. So I was his first online date. He did not know what the fuck he was doing. So I was there to prop up his ego. He did not know whether he was going to be desirable to the women he wanted to be with.
Yeah.
And I think when he realized that I wanted him and that he could be wanted, he was like, now I don't need you.
Now
I'm going to go out and get somebody better than you. And he ended up dating somebody that was famous and not me at the time at all, completely.
Thank God.
It worked out for me. But I think about that men chase you to fulfill their own ego. And I think women do it too. I mean, look, we're not saints either, but I think men do it a lot more than women because women at the end of the day, we're programmed to just want to actually meet a good guy and to settle down with them.
I think so. Yeah. The amount of guys lately, I feel like that chase and then when they feel like they got what they wanted, like especially if I sleep with them, the intensity dwindles quickly after that. To the point where I'm like, am I bad at sex? But like, I know I'm not. I feel like when you've been married for a long time, like you're not bad at sex because you have to have so much sex and like you just learn so much. But then it's like, maybe I'm only good at having sex with that one person. I don't know. I do think there's something to be said about like the man gets the sex from you and something in him doesn't like you as much anymore.
Oh, I think they now feel like they've conquered you in a sense and now they're on to conquer other foreign nations.
Yes. So you do have to just wait because you have to. That's why I now wait to have. And by now I mean like just starting today. I now wait to have sex with somebody.
I'm going to hold you to that. Okay, you better text me the next time you're at a guy's apartment.
I'm going to be like, is today an exception? I know there's always like an exception where I'm like, well,
and that's when you get dicked over because I made an exception for that guy. I was like, there's no way this dorky guy is ever going to screw me over, and he did, and I was like. Don't make an exception to the rule because you don't know them. You really don't.
You don't. And I thought that there was an exception with my marriage too, where I was like, oh, well, what we have is so special. Like I like or like non-monogamy isn't going to ruin our relationship. It might do that to other people's relationships because their relationships are not like as special as ours, which turns out like we also were not the exception to the rule. Turns out like rarely are you the exception.
Right. Most of the time you're the rule.
Yeah.
You're the rule. Do you think what you're looking for now in a man and a partner has changed since dating Mikey, or are you still looking for a man that marches to the beat of his own drum but maybe just isn't cheating on you?
Yeah. Definitely monogamy. I know that I need that. I think a part of me when I get lazy or tired or if I'm just not in my flow, I think I can default to that, like, I want to find a man to save me kind of thing, where, like, when I get that relationship, like, everything's going to feel whole when I get that, like, blended family that I want, or when so I have to check myself. But I do generally think that my type is the same in certain ways. Like, I want a manly man. I do like traditional gender roles in a way. But I also...
You make your own bread. So yeah,
yes,
that's fine.
I make my own bread, but I also need to... a guy needs to be okay with me making money on the internet. Like, not on OnlyFans. Maybe. I don't know.
Never say never.
Never say never, because honestly, sometimes it sounds like, I don't know, like feet pics. Sure, why not?
Literally the people who are like, yeah, I got an OnlyFans, I make $1 million from my feet. I'm like, who knows that it's my feet? I actually have a jacked up pinky toe.
So we would know.
But I'm like, oh, but maybe that would sell. It's called it's a birth defect. It's called an overlapping fifth toe. And
there's
my pinky
for sure a market for that. You actually might be like elite on what is it? Foot finder?
Foot fetish finder?
Yeah,
something
like that.
At Feet Fetish Finder. I know.
Yeah.
That was before OnlyFans. That was, I'm sure there's a section.
Who are
on there.
these, like, there's so many of them on the internet, but like, who are you in person? Have you ever met somebody in person who's like, I have a foot fetish?
No,
I'd like them to
haven't.
Reveal themselves.
I know.
What do you look like?
And it's mostly men, right? I think I've ever
there's
heard of
gotta be women.
I'm sure there are. And it's cool, but it's also, I guess it's a good thing we don't know about our coworkers' foot fetishes, right? It's like, it's probably somebody closer to you than you think, but it's good that the guy sitting next to you, you don't know his kinks in the cubicle, because it would be very strange.
There's this book called Want that I actually I learned about through my podcast, because I do ads for it, and I read it. I'm starting to read it. It's all these like little articles from women around the world, different socioeconomic status, different cultures, whatever, but they write these anonymous articles about their like secret sexual fetishes, and it's so interesting what some women are into, like pee fetishes and like
being urinated on.
Yeah, or like seeing a penis pee is like a turn on for.
Oh my
it's
God.
in there quite a bit. I guess that's
actually
a thing.
Such a turn off but that is the thing.
It's like, but we think women are just like, oh, normal and stuff. But people do have some weird ass fetishes.
Yeah, I mean, 50 Shades of Grey did so well because people are kinky and weird.
Yeah. And also like full bellies. People have a fetish for like a woman with this, because not all of them are straight either. So it's like gay stories, bi story, whatever. And like a woman's belly after she eats, like looking pregnant from food is a fetish.
That's
like a whole chapter.
So interesting. So a pizza baby is a fetish.
Yes.
Interesting. And here we are thinking, I'm not cute after I eat. Oh my gosh, I'm so bloated.
We could be turning on like just the girl sitting next to us at the restaurant. Who knows?
You never know.
I really don't.
My mind has been blown.
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, but hey, it's life. That's great.
Yeah. We're always surprised. There's always something to learn.
There is always something to learn. And you said, back to your point, it's like, oh, the guys always ghost after, or they're less interested after I have sex with them. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think that basically it's not the sex. It's never about the sex. It's just about the fact that, they got you, and that was, maybe their fetish was just to get you, right? That was...
Yeah. That was it. They just wanted you to break your own rule.
Exactly. That's in and of itself a fetish, right? It's just to be like,
so rude. She
can't be gotten, so I'm going to get her and I'm going to prove to myself that I can do it. And it's like a notch on their belt almost.
So annoying.
No.
That made me just, like, now I'm re-mad at the last guy that I did that with. Such a jerk. He like really acted like he liked me so much, and then I had sex with him, and I really didn't like him. But I was felt so rejected when he was like, I don't know if this is working. I'm like, yeah, no shit. Like, I've been pretty much saying that, not with words, for the last like couple weeks. Why did you make me have sex with you? Like, when you're just like, fine, like you just kind of give them what they want.
Well, the worst thing is being broken up with a guy that you didn't really like that much in the first place, but you were kind of going along with. I have a very close girlfriend who dated a guy for a year, and in the beginning she was like, I'm not quite sure. I don't know. I guess he's a good guy. And she had just been dumped by a guy she was super in love with. And then... she kind of warmed up to him because they work on you. That's the thing. And she warmed up to this guy that she wasn't super into in the beginning. And then after a year, he broke up with her. And she was like, it's so frustrating that he broke up with me because I wasn't that into him in the beginning. And he was the one pushing it along. Ugh. And he was the one trying to really get me to commit. And now I'm the one feeling heartbroken over a guy that I wasn't sure that I liked to begin with. But I think that's the thing. It's like men can't be convinced to fall in love with women, whereas I think women can be worked on.
Yes.
Like, I dated a guy in college who I remember when I first met him junior year, I was like, this man, I said to my best girlfriend, we were all studying abroad in Shanghai, and it was this program that NYU did with a university out there, and I met him on this bus that was taking us to campus, and I just thought he was so obnoxious and so disgusting, and he just had this very like bravado energy about him. And I was like, that is the most disgusting human on the face of the earth. And I was like, ew, I would never touch him with a 10-foot pole. And we started off, because in college you just hang out together as friends. Yeah. And then we started off hanging out as friends, and I thought he was quirky and funny. And I was like, okay, but I would still never hook up with you. And then you get to know them. And then he made it very clear that he was into me, and he just kept working on me.
Yeah, he's like, I can tell how much you hate me. Right. I'm gonna work on you.
Right. And he worked on me for a year and a half, and then I was drunk one night at his apartment, and we made out, and I was like, oh, I actually am in love with you because we're best friends, and I always wanted that friendship with my partner. And I fell super hard for him, even though he was not physically what I wanted at first, and he had really bad breath.
Oh, isn't that the worst?
It was so bad, and other people knew it too.
Oh,
like they were
had a reputation for it.
Yeah. Like when he stood next to you, and people were like, "How do you make out with that?" But truly, love is not only blind; it's also, what is the word for?
Yeah, I don't know. What's the word for not being able to?
I don't know. I looked it up. At one point. There is a word for smell blindness when you can't smell it. I was like, I smell it, but I don't care. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, when you smell, like, I'm sure with your kids, I don't, like, with my dog, she smells, but I love the
But
way
you love
she
it.
smells.
So
Like, your
it's
kids.
like when your husband snores, but you love him. It's like his snoring doesn't bother you.
It's endearing.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
like my kid snoring, I think is cute. My
Yes.
ex-husband snoring, I wanted to stab him in his sleep.
Right, exactly, because you love them. And it's like, in a way, it's morbid. I think about this with my dog. I'm like, one day when you're not here, I'm going to miss how much you smell because it reminds me of you, right? So, but he worked on me, and then I was so ready to commit to him. And he was Jewish, and he said that being married to a Jewish woman was very important to him. So I said, I'll convert for you.
Oh my God, he's like, that's too intense for me.
Well,
Lady,
then
back
he
off.
just decided that he didn't want to be with, I think he didn't want to be with a woman who had to convert to Judaism. He wanted to be with somebody who was born into the Jewish faith, which, by the way, is totally fair. We were 22, you're figuring yourself out, but he left me pretty unceremoniously and then didn't want to give me any closure, really wouldn't explain why. I kind of only realized why very long after the fact.
Yeah.
He just said, it was very vague. He said he could not do the things he wanted to do while dating me. I was like, I have no idea what that means, but I remember begging him to stay. I was like, I will give you more freedom. I'll leave you alone for as much as I just groveled.
You're like, I'll go away.
I'll go away as long as you stay. Poof, I'm gone.
I'll go away. Just call me.
Just be my boyfriend.
Yeah.
And it's shocking that I was willing to do
No,
that.
I know. Sometimes when I think back at some of the things I did, I'm like, oh, no. Why would you do that?
But in the moment, you're literally willing to just put aside all of your dignity for the sake of not being alone.
Do you know what I did when I found out that my husband was cheating, was sleeping around, whatever? I did not do what you might think, like, you know, in the movies where they take all his clothes and throw it outside to the front yard or whatever, like, so I'm leaving. No, I went out and bought like thousands of dollars worth of sexy lingerie to like try to be hotter than this like little bimbo that he was like slept with. Isn't that so, like, I'm like, oh my God, you're so pathetic when I think back at that. And
you were trying so hard to save what you knew.
And to like be better and to win, like that. It was like brought out like the competition in me, or the part of me that felt like I needed to prove that I could be chosen, and that like that my sex is better than anybody else's. You don't need to go elsewhere for it. Where like I was missing the whole picture. It had nothing to do with me.
It was not a deficiency on your end. It was just who he was, that no matter who you were. And when I look at these massive A-list celebrity breakups, and sometimes when the man cheats on like a complete
like
full
Giselle
specimen of a human.
Yeah,
yes,
like
I'm like
Adriana Lima. I'm like, what?
I'm like, you like cheated on that? I mean, it really isn't about the woman. You could literally be married to the perfect specimen of a woman. Obviously, we're talking about very superficial qualities here because we don't know them personally, but like, let's just take that for what it is. And it still wouldn't be enough. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the man. Do you think there was something in your childhood? Because I do think childhood screws us all up one way or another, even if we had the most well-intentioned family or whatever. Do you think there's something in your childhood that led you to want to prove yourself to men in relationships? Because I have psychoanalyzed myself so many times. I've gone to so many years of therapy. I know where my shit comes from.
Oh yeah, I know where mine. I've done the
where does it
Hoffman
come from?
process. I've done ketamine treatments for trauma. I've done so much therapy. I know exactly where it comes from. My dad, love him to death. He is my greatest supporter, and you know, in a lot of ways, like one of my best friends, but the guy fucked me up. Like he was just like, he's one of those people, he would run like multiple marathons every year. He's one of those people, you don't want to be caught sitting on the couch in his presence because he'll just make you feel like the laziest person in the world. He's very, like I'm one of 5, he would line us up and make us race each other. Like it was always, everything was a competition. He himself is motivated by like competition. For me, and I think for a lot of women, that's not the most effective form of motivation to hear like, oh, well, so-and-so got into Harvard. Like, what are you or she aced her SATs. It was always like trying to get me to perform better by comparing me to my siblings or other people. Well-intentioned, but also like really fucks you up. And I think just growing up and, you know, people being like, it kind of just, I don't think anybody said it, but it was like you said before, like the Disney princess, like you're going to be saved by a man and that's just what's going to happen. And to be chosen is the best thing. And even to this day, like now what I've learned is like, I love my dad, but he's not the person that I'm going to talk about my dates with, because he'll trigger that in me that can then really hurt my feelings. Like when I went out with a guy, last year, I was telling him about it, and he's like, oh, well, do you think he liked you? And I was just like, why do you phrase it like that? Like, why don't you ask me if I liked him? Because, but in his heart, like, he just wants me to be protected, and he wants me to be safe, and he thought that this was a good guy, and he wants the guy to like me because he doesn't want the guy to leave me, that sort of thing. But what I hear is like, you need to convince people to like you.
Right.
Which is hurtful.
Right. And you heard that over and over growing up. And so now it's like ingrained in you to act that out. But at least you know it, right?
100%.
And so you can, even though maybe you're not perfectly recovered from all those bad habits, you can catch yourself when you do it now, right? And it's an active practice.
Totally. Right? Because we can default to that all the time, just like I said. And I think that's really interesting, like that you don't drink. And one of the things that I find, like when I've done a few months sober, I do find it easier to not fall into those default patterns. Like I feel like the things that that kind of chip away at your self-esteem or make you more anxious, whatever that might be, like maybe it's not alcohol, but maybe it's like, I don't know, eating crappy food or something. Mm-hmm. It's like it makes it harder for you to catch yourself when you're falling into those like default modes.
Because they're comfortable, and I think people mistake something that's comfortable for something that they should be doing. Mm-hmm. And I always think that what my parents kind of taught me through their life, not so much what they said, but what they did, was that actually the best things in your life will come from the most uncomfortable situations you throw yourself in. I mean, they came to this country with no money, not speaking the language. If they wanted to be comfortable, they certainly were not acting like it, and they were uncomfortable for many years. Like the first decade of our life in the U.S. was such a struggle. And life is not meant to be comfortable. I think it's meant to be meaningful. And I think when we default too much into that comfort, we inhibit ourselves from being with the people that we're meant to be with, from doing the things we're meant to do, right? It's like when you're not feeling good and you take that drink and then you allow yourself to sleep with a guy that maybe you're not that into but feels like a warm, comforting blanket for now.
How did you know my introduction to our podcast episode that we just did? I have to go record the introduction to the episode we just recorded for my podcast.
Oh, I didn't even know.
That's literally what my introduction is about, like getting drunk and sleeping with a guy.
Yeah, but like you wouldn't have done it sober, right?
No, absolutely not.
Alcohol gives you permission to do the things you shouldn't be doing because they feel comfortable and they make you feel good in the moment. I just had lunch with a girlfriend, and she told me about this guy that she's gone on a couple dates with and she's hooked up with, and he's really not good to her at all.
Yeah.
And she's like, but he's funny and he's a good hang, and I have nothing going on in my life right now, so it's like not that dangerous. I know he's not the one. Like I'm just if he asks me out again, I'll go out with him because I'm not seeing anybody else. But I'm like, but if you go out with him again, and even the mental space that he's taking up in your mind, you are actively allowing him to take up space in your life that now inhibits you from maybe swiping a couple more times on Hinge, right?
Oh.
So it's not so much the fact that you're just allowing him to sort of be in your life as a fun time. If your goal is to find a husband, women almost don't do anything just for fun. There's always an angle, right?
Always.
You always try to convince yourself, no, but like I'm bored, and it's comforting to have somebody to text who meets you out at the end of the night to go home with, so you don't have to be like, okay, well, I went out, I had a good time, and now I'm going home alone. Mm-hmm. That's comforting, but it's not productive because then it just puts you psychologically more into a space that you shouldn't be, and you can only be in one space at a time. So
you're so right. I don't even want. You're just so right. Okay, I'm gonna be re-listen. This is gonna be the only episode I ever record that I re-listen to. I'm gonna be like writing all this stuff down.
So don't drink. No, but it's like I think that's the thing is like alcohol was an excuse for me to do the things that I shouldn't be doing.
Right,
and not even so much like I was married and happily so by the time I quit drinking. But I went through periods of sobriety in my 20s because I was like, I just really need to face what I want and who I am, and how sometimes that's not very glamorous to the outside world.
Yeah.
So breaking up with a boyfriend, I think, is emotionally devastating enough. I've never had to break off a marriage, and I've certainly never had to break off a marriage with kids involved.
Oh, yeah.
How did you guys break the news to Remy and Soleil?
That was like one of the things that I lost the most sleep over, because I was so worried about how they would feel, and the guilt really plagued me for a while. And when I finally did tell them, mind you, they were 2 and 4, they could have cared less. Like, they literally did not care. And that's what I'm so grateful for, because they love their dad and they don't have a preference in a parent. Like, they're happy to go with him and they're happy to go with me, which is so comforting, because I know there's a lot of parents where, like, the kids don't want to go to the dad's house, or they don't want to go to the mom's house. I feel like they usually don't want to go to the dad's house. My kids love to go to the dad's house because they get to watch YouTube. No, he's a great dad, like, very hands-on. Like, when you confront things that you are so afraid of, a lot of times you find that most of that fear was just completely made up in your head. And I think more than anything, like, to have 2 parents that love you and that get along with each other and are not bashing each other. I don't think divorce is what fucks up kids. I think it's when parents have a very tumultuous relationship and that bleeds into the energy of the children. That's when it can really affect them. Would it be nice if we could all live together in the same house? Like, logistically, it's a pain in the ass sometimes. And, a lot of the conversations I do have with my kids throughout the week are on FaceTime. But they're right down the street. They're not missing me. And I think, if anything, it's making them, like, pretty well-adjusted kids. So I was happy I got to do it when they were young, too. I think maybe it's harder when they're a little older.
Do you think they understood the concept of divorce? How did you explain it? Like, what was the actual verbiage you used when you sat them down?
We love you guys so much, and we just feel that we can be better parents to you if we don't live in the same house. We still love each other, and we're still a family, but we're not. Mama and Papa, they call him Papa, are not married anymore. But, like, in a way, I think my son is, like, kind of still in denial. Like, he'll be like, he'll call him my husband sometimes, and I'm like, no, remember, we're not married. And he's like, okay, like, whatever you say. Like, he's not, like, he doesn't really get it, because none of his friends' parents are divorced. We did it. What I've noticed is, like, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, the parents are still together. It's not till, like, the later years the parents start separating. And then
at which point, like, they'll come to you for advice.
Yes, exactly. Hopefully I'll have some good advice to give them by that point, because I'm still figuring it out. But yeah, I mean, it broke my heart for a while, but we're getting into the groove of it. And that's... I'm grateful for that, because it was tough.
It is good that you did it young, because I had a girlfriend who had a child with, and she's still married to him, her husband, and they were going through a really rough patch, and they talked about divorce to the point that they told their families that they were getting a divorce. And then they decided to work it out, but it hasn't been a great marriage. And I talk to her all the time, and she's like, I'm like, how are you guys doing? And she's like, we're okay. I'm like, that's really not great.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you're going to do it, you should do it now when your daughter is too young to really know what's going on. She won't know anything different. I have a girlfriend who's going through a divorce right now, and her husband actually left her while she was pregnant, which is insane.
Insane. Like, at least... God, you can't wait 9 months so you don't look like a complete asshole. I guess it's worse when the baby comes, too. There's really no good time. There's
no good time, but he left her. And the only saving grace I said for her, I was like, your son will never know any different.
That's true.
And he will not be fucked up by this in a way where, if this happened while he was 10, and he's fully cognizant that this isn't the case with everybody else's families,
right,
that he'll be really messed up from it. And she moved in with her parents, and they're Asian, so it's a very kind of intergenerational family.
Yeah.
The grandparents are helping out, and I'm like, that's great. He has so much love in his life. You know, he's the love of 3 adults. He doesn't need the dad.
So the dad's not in the life at all?
The dad is somewhat in the picture, but not in a way he's kind of like a part-time nanny.
Okay.
almost.
Yeah, that's not it.
That's sort of...
I mean, whatever, though.
Yeah. He says he
guess
wants
if
to be in the kid's life, but he's not really in the kid's life. And it was a very messed up situation what happened. I mean, obviously, dude, if you're going to leave your wife, don't do it when she's 6 months pregnant. Maybe don't try for a kid, okay?
I know.
Like, this was not an oops baby. They got married and they planned to have a child and they tried. And they had a kid.
I know someone else that this happened to also. Yeah, it's so interesting, like that. I don't know. It's so interesting how somebody could just kind of change their mind.
Yeah,
about,
or it's like
life.
all of a sudden they realize that it is very real, that it's not just a joke, that there is a baby coming and they're not ready to be a father in the way that they really need to step up to the plate. And I think it's so bizarre. But you've talked a lot about guilt on your channels. And I think what you said was so interesting was that you've felt a lot of guilt as a mom, which obviously because you're divorcing your husband and you're splitting time with the kids and, you know, you have talked about how that has affected your children. But you also talked about this concept where you recently realized that you shouldn't feel guilty for not being a man and how men's cycles are 24 hours versus women's are a full month. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I thought it was such an interesting conversation and it kind of blew my mind because I dread the 2 weeks before my period. Yeah. And then for 2 weeks, I'm the best person alive. And then like the 10 days before my period, don't talk to me.
I feel you, sister. I actually was recently diagnosed with PCOS, which makes a lot of sense for like my moods kind of, and even like my ADHD symptoms. A lot of that can be a result of PCOS, which comes with a host of different symptoms, one of them being like horrible PMS. And I started reading a lot of books on the female hormone cycle. One of them was called Period Power. And it talks about how the different phases of our cycle can actually be used, it can be looked at as a superpower rather than a hindrance. Like when we are more right before we get our period, when our progesterone is higher and we're feeling a little bit more introverted, it's a chance to listen to ourselves and to rest and not to be as social and not to make as many like quick decisions about things and to kind of take that as an opportunity to kind of look at what's happened during the first 2 weeks of your cycle when you were more social and saying yes to a lot of things. It's kind of a time where you get to review. And that's important because if you're the same way every day, you don't have any more like of a special ability. Like, you know, if you can't see, then your smell increases. Or if you can't hear, then your ability to see is usually sharper. And that's kind of what happens with a woman. Like some of our abilities are dampened and some are heightened during different parts of our cycle. So like really learning how to lean into those is something that can be used as a tool. I mean, unfortunately with PCOS, like you can take birth control and it will basically shut down your cycle. And then you don't have these abilities. Like you don't have your hindrances, but you also don't have the abilities. And so what I'm choosing to do is use acupuncture to kind of get to the root cause rather than take birth control, which is I'm a little afraid to say that because the doctor who put me on the birth control is one of the best OBGYNs in the world. I had her on my podcast, and I haven't told her yet that I'm not going to take the birth control. But I've just been hearing, like, the more and more I read about how important it is for us to have a cycle and to have a healthy cycle and to really learn about each phase of the cycle and what we can use it for to our advantage, it makes me not want to shut it down, you know, because it makes us a woman. And the whole thing about guilt is, yes, part of the cycle is feeling guilty, and that comes in during the PMS phase, like right before. So that comes in your luteal phase. But now that I'm aware of it and like I'm aware that it's my hormones and it's not inherently me, it's not like my soul and my essence, I can just, once you have that distance, it's easier to be like, okay, being guilty, feeling guilty has never helped me with one thing in life. You know, having anxiety about something is not helpful. But it is an alert to take a second look at something, which is important. You know, think about people who don't ever feel guilty.
Sociopaths.
Yeah. They're not usually people that you want, you know, in your circle.
So it's all about sort of harnessing that guilt and learning about what it's sending you, the message.
What message is it sending you? It's there to help you out.
I love that.
Yeah.
And speaking of all things women and messages and everything, you developed a vaping addiction.
I did.
When you were going through your divorce.
Sure did.
Because
Because I'm 17 years old and I've never heard of nicotine addiction.
But I think you said it started off pretty harmless. You needed something, right? A crutch to just get you through this really, really brutal time in your life.
Yeah.
And then it just became something that you could not let go of. And you said that quitting vaping was the hardest thing you've had to do ever.
Oh my
Which
God.
is shocking because you were going through a divorce, so you would assume that divorce was the hardest thing you've had to do ever.
Ugh.
But quitting vaping was tougher. How did you quit?
Yeah.
And have you gone back at all, or you're fully off of it?
I'm fully off of vaping. I did have like a 2-day little relapse. Actually like a month ago, but I was like, hell no, I'm not going back to this. But yeah, no, I've been done vaping for almost a year now. Like
Congrats.
Yeah. That was the hardest thing I ever had to quit. I picked it up because I was like, it was when I had been sober for like 8 months and I just didn't have a crutch and I felt like I needed an outlet in some way. And my sisters, actually they're going to kill me if I say that, but whatever I'll say. My sisters had it, like we were on vacation, whatever. And I just like kind of take a puff of it. And then, and then they were like, get your own. So like bought my own, took a puff of it. And then like it comes home with me and it's something you can do sneaky in the bathroom. The kids don't see you. It doesn't smell. It doesn't make your hands smell. And then slowly but fucking surely, and you know what? Not slowly, quickly, this toxin goes right into your bloodstream faster than a cigarette. And, I had taken drugs of cigarettes growing up when I would like be out drinking. I never got addicted. Right. So I was like, I'm not the kind of person who gets addicted to nicotine. Like my ex-husband smoked cigarettes. I always thought it was disgusting. I never thought I could be a person that would be addicted to smoking because it's bad for you and it's stupid. It's so dumb. Like ew. But I was like, I found myself being so hooked on this thing to the point where I would wake up in the middle of the night to pee and have to hit this vape.
Oh, it got that bad.
Oh my God. It got so bad. It was like my dirty little secret. I liked that. I liked that it was so accessible to do. And what it did is I would take a hit of it and it would just give me like a surge of like energy and just happy hormones. And I did a bunch of research on it. And basically what it is, it gives you a rush of serotonin, dopamine, and one other neurotransmitter that like makes you feel good. And so like no wonder it's so addicting. And it also it's so much more accessible. So I think that's why, and it hits your bloodstream much faster. So that's why. And then why was it so hard to quit? Because, well, it turns out nicotine, when you are reliant on it, your body stops making those hormones on its own. So if you stop, you get very depressed.
It's withdrawal.
And it just never felt like the right time to be depressed. I was like, I don't have 2 weeks to be depressed.
When is a good time to be depressed?
Especially when like one puff would take away all the anxious feelings that it created in the first place. So I got on this cycle. I tried to quit like 10 times. I kept going back to it. Eventually, I went on Wellbutrin, and Wellbutrin is a drug that it's like an anti-anxiety, antidepressant, but it's also used for to help people quit smoking because it kind of curbs the withdrawal a little, just enough. Like I did feel like shit for probably 2 weeks, but I was like, I'm going to feel like shit for 2 weeks and then it's going to get better. And then I gained like 15 pounds. And, but I don't like to say that because I don't want anybody who's thinking about quitting to be like, oh, I'm going to feel depressed and get fat. It's like, it's kind of true, but then you're free and there's nothing better than feeling free.
So it's funny. I just started Wellbutrin
I thought you were going to say I just started vaping.
I'm
good
so
for you.
Sober. Can you imagine? How do I twist this into something positive? No, I just got on Wellbutrin. I was on Zoloft for a couple months over the spring and the summer to help with my anxiety. And then I got off of it because I was having a lot of, it sounds ridiculous, but I could not stop eating on Zoloft.
Really?
I could not stop.
I've been on both of them. You're going to like Wellbutrin.
Okay. So it's too early to tell. But on Zoloft, my cravings were so intense. Like it was like, it's almost like pregnancy cravings. eating sugar so much. I was eating so much sugar. I always wanted to get ice cream, whatever, a sweet treat, whatever. So I was like, this is not sustainable. So I stopped, and then I was like, I probably don't need an SSRI. I was like, I think I'm healed. I felt great. It absolutely changed my life. So 100% would recommend Zoloft, and I have a lot of girlfriends who are on it who did not have those same side effects, but I just knew
it worked for me really well after because I had postpartum anxiety.
Yes, a lot of people use it
really
for that.
Helped. Great for like OCD type.
Exactly. But I a month ago started feeling really depressed, and it wasn't so much the anxiety this time as it was just like a mood disorder. So my psychiatrist like, you should try Wellbutrin, but it's not supposed to make you gain weight. It's supposed to help you lose weight.
It actually, it will. So I gained weight not from the medication. I gained weight because you oftentimes do gain weight when you quit nicotine, only because nicotine is an appetite suppressant. So I wasn't eating. And also because it completely destroys your hormones. Like, so getting off of it, you gain weight. You eat more, you gain weight. I don't know if it's just because you're eating more. I think it's also to do with, it just messes up your metabolism.
Right. I'm sure that's what it is. And your body's used to this chemical sort of suppressing everything for a while, and then you don't have it. So are you still on Wellbutrin?
I'm not on Wellbutrin anymore. I got off of that. And you should get your hormones checked out too, because one of the things that I realized from what I was always trying to call like my ADHD, my depression, my anxiety, whatever, throughout my life, I've gone through ups and downs of and I'm not sure if it's situational or chemical, but now I can, like, yourself by your 30s and you're like, oh, this is chemical.
Right.
And I think a lot of it is my hormones. So acupuncture really helped my hormones balance out better than any drug that I had taken before. I went off the Wellbutrin after I stopped vaping. But then I still was feeling the depressive symptoms. And I was like, is it PMS? So then when I found out I had PCOS, I started I just found out I had PCOS, but I had been doing acupuncture kind of. My acupuncturist was like, I think you probably have it. So she was treating me as if I did. And my skin cleared up. My mood was great. So
acupuncture really worked for you.
It really did.
How did you get your hormones checked? Like through what kind of doctor?
So my neurologist.
Okay.
I did like a hormone rhythm test. You can get it from your OBGYN. But she could see the PCOS through an ultrasound. Okay. Because you could see it on your ovaries. But there's like 3 different ways that there's 3 different symptoms you have to have in order to have PCOS. It's like PCOS looking ovaries, which you can find in an ultrasound, and also irregular periods or high testosterone symptoms. So you don't actually have to have high testosterone, but high testosterone symptoms are like hair, like thinning of your hair on your face for some people. Thankfully, I really didn't have that. And like, and irregular periods and like moodiness, PMS.
Okay, and you had all the symptoms except for the hair.
Yeah, thank God I had everything but the beard. I don't think I would have been able to handle that.
That would have been a lot. You were dating somebody and it came out in a public way, even though you were not trying to make it public. So now I guess he's your ex-boyfriend. But I loved what you said about it on your podcast. You said just because we can't be together doesn't mean that I'm mad at him, and it doesn't mean I still don't think he's an amazing person. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so gracious of you, because it's so hard to break up with somebody and not villainize them.
Yes. Well, I wanted to, but this was for, it was for press. So I had to make myself look good. Just kidding.
No, but it seemed like it was coming from a genuine place.
Yeah.
And it seemed like you had really made peace with it. And it wasn't a super long relationship, so maybe it was easier in that regard. I mean, do you feel like because you've had to make peace with Mikey and because of everything you've just had to almost make peace with in order to move on, like how have you found that grace within yourself to not villainize every guy that screws you over?
Yeah, I know,
or
right?
doesn't screw you over but just dumps you or whatever.
It's hard. I think sometimes when I think I've really matured and I don't villainize any man anymore and I can take rejection so well, then like a guy will come along and reject me and I'm like, bedridden over it. In this particular case, I think it was easier because I really knew that we weren't meant to be together. He was a nice guy. Could I have found things to say about him that weren't that nice? Sure. But like, it never makes you look good when somebody dumps you and then you're like, well, he was a jerk anyway. It's like, okay, you would say that because you just got dumped.
Right.
Yeah, and ultimately, he was a good guy. He didn't do anything horrible to me. He treated me very well when we dated. So, like, I don't really have anything bad
regrets.
to say about him.
You just weren't meant to be together.
No.
How is it dating in the public eye?
Am I in the public? I mean, I guess I'm choosing to be because I have a podcast where I talk all about my dating, but called
Your life
Barely
is very
Filtered.
online.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Although I don't really share anything about my dating on my Instagram that much, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't mind being in the public eye. I think what I'm realizing is that some people do, which is something that I kind of need to, I think, probably address earlier on in my dating. Just be like, do you care if I mention you anonymously on my podcast? Do you not want me to mention anything about any of our interactions on my podcast? Which, like, I'm open to, but I think I haven't really been asking, and I've just kind of been like anonymously talking about my dates, and I don't know. It hasn't really worked out that well for me. I don't know if that's why. Maybe it's me, but I did have a guest on who said that you should never share anything in its infancy because then it's susceptible to the energies of the world, and maybe that's what's been happening. I don't know. I think that there's truth to that, but I don't think that my relationships. I don't think I haven't found the one yet because I've been talking about my dates on my podcast.
Right. I agree. I agree with what that guest said because I don't like to tell people that I'm doing something in the midst of doing it. I told nobody about my podcast when I was recording it.
Even me, who was like, will you come on my podcast? And you're like, sure. I wish I knew you were going to be in LA. I wouldn't have taken a red eye last night.
I did not know. To be fair, I'm going to LA in 2 weeks, which I don't know when this episode will air, but it'll probably be after. I did not know I was going to be in LA or else we would have recorded there. But
well, that's okay. We're going to have to see each other there too.
Round two. There's more to talk about. But yes, I do think outside energy can throw off plans, and especially maybe not so much with relationships actually and in your career. I think people love to give you their opinion, whether or not it's right or wrong or whatever. It's just their opinion, and sometimes even the most strong-minded of us can take that opinion, and if it's not our opinion, be like, well, but are they right? Is this the right move for me or not? And so I just don't like to tell people about anything I'm doing until I do it. But again, I think if you really met the one, it would not matter that you were talking about them. But I think it is probably good to talk about that with a guy and just to maybe bring it up. And
I think it's probably like the integrous thing to do to give them that option.
Right. So maybe try that next time, see how it goes.
All right,
fine. Okay. So you recently said, I want to end on this question. You said in a video you're making homemade bread in this and that you're practicing consistency over perfection, which I loved. But what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? And what is your advice to women who still feel like they need to be perfect in order to live a good life?
Oh, well, you're not going to be able to do that. So you might as well just quit while you're ahead, because if your goal is perfection, you will disappoint yourself over and over again. And I think what it really comes down to for me is feeling proud of myself and feeling like I am keeping my own word to myself. So if my goal is perfection, I'm setting myself up for failure, and then my self-esteem will suffer. So that is really what I try, just to take baby steps in the right direction every day, knowing that I will fall down and focusing more on the recovery and putting more emphasis on getting back on the horse rather than beating myself up about falling down because it's inevitable.
That's great. Be kind to yourself effectively.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here.
Where
can people find you?
You can find me at Aurora Culpo on Instagram. And then my podcast is Barely Filtered, anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And then Instagram, it's Barely Filtered Pod.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.